Let's get that on camera. That's awesome. Okay, say that again.
It's a little different here because we hang on to people sometimes when we shouldn't be because we can't get them out, weather, whatever.
Right.
So we get opportunities to do a little more sometimes, which is nice. Get to learn lots.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it can be very exciting. It can be lots going on even for a small little hospital. So
Yeah, it's probably stressful too, right?
oh, it can be so stressful.
Yeah.
Very stressful.
Yeah. So we're in Fort St. John right now, and I've tricked this nice lady here into a quick little interview here, which will end up on my transplant page later. So I'll just give you a little heads up on how I've done this. I've see that popcorn. I've bribed her with the popcorn, and we're waiting for one other nurse to come back, and then we're gonna give out the popcorn that and go from there. But until then, I'm gonna pick this nice lady's brain here, and we'll see where what else we have. So, have you ever had somebody come in where you've said where they've become, or were in the situation where they could have become an organ donor?
Yeah, I've had a few situations where we've had people who potentially just unfortunately didn't make it out in time. It's, just sometimes there's nothing you can do. And I have successfully sent people elsewhere to be organ donors. So it's not very often that we're able to do it, but when we are, it's definitely sorry.
No.
I see Stephanie speaking. No, she's over next week. Yeah. I'll send her back after when we're done. I'm not sure, just maybe call her. Okay, goodbye. Missing nurse. Okay.
Yeah. Usually it's a patient to go missing.
Yeah, so I'm like, I stole her for a bit. But yeah, I've had the opportunity to do it successfully, and
right.
sometimes not. But
right.
Yeah. It's,
So, what? How do you feel? Like, and have you had to have a discussion with the family, or?
Yeah, I think it's sometimes a tough thing to talk about here, especially because I feel like we don't know it that well, and
right.
we don't have the resources to talk about it. We haven't done it a whole lot, so it's
right.
really hard. But
yeah.
The one time we did it successfully, I had a great internist here that was very on the ball and printed out a ton of information for us, and we had a big discussion as a family, and it was tough, but
yeah.
I think in the end it made everybody feel good about it.
Yeah.
We did something good out of a very sad situation.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. It was.
And I think that this is the part that most people don't understand. They don't see, because really you're here, and your primary job, of course, is to save people, right? You're always saving somebody's life. But then we have that, like you said, it's tragic. It's a very sad situation, and I mean, as a heart recipient, I'm alive, yet unfortunately, we most definitely know that the person I have got the heart from is no longer with us. So somewhere that conversation had to take place, and I think that this is where I know there's science, I know there's I know there's all these things. This is where the miracle starts, in my opinion, because we have a person like you who wasn't aware, like you just said. I mean, we don't deal with this every day. Yeah. Yet the decision was made, and you had this conversation, and I wonder, do you ever think about that donor going out, and what could have possibly happened with that donor? Do you ever think about that?
I think the thing I thought about the most is that his family wasn't going to go with them, right? So
right.
I think that was the saddest part for me, was we're sending somebody away and that's the last time, right?
Yeah.
So in that case, I think it was hard, but beyond that, I think it was just, we did find out, some things after that happened, the good that came out of it.
Yeah.
BC transplant and things like that.
Right.
But it was hard to think about them just going by themselves, I think was the biggest
right.
thing, yeah.
And see, that's pretty valid too,
Yeah.
because when I went in to get my heart transplant, okay, I found out in the morning that I was gonna have this transplant, and to be quite honest, I had a horrible night.
Yeah.
The person in the room next to me had a really, really bad night. I had no sleep, all this other thing. So I woke up, I was pretty cranky, I gotta admit, and all of a sudden I get this great news about the fact that I'm gonna get a second chance here. And when we look at this and this second chance and everything like that, that was all initiated because someone like you had to have that, like that's a tough discussion, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And I mean, so as we look back, here we go, we got a team going by.
Yeah, sure.
Now, as that person leaves, when we go in for that transplant, we're by ourselves. At this point, I knew most of my medical team.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time with them. The anesthesiologists and all that. These people I knew quite well because I'd been in for so many operations. But I think the one thing that's so important about when you say that, when that person goes off alone, there's hospitals that actually have a moment of silence before those organs are what we call harvested or taken to be used somewhere else. And during that moment of silence, that's when that hospital gives that person that chance, right? To that love.
Yeah.
I mean, because in the end, when we go into the operating room, it's that and either or, right? But do you ever think about how much that by you having that conversation, the potential you had by having that conversation to completely change somebody's life? Do you ever think about that?
I guess not, just because we don't see the other end. I mean,
Right.
it's hard to, I guess, imagine it because we don't see it, right?
Right.
Like it's like we know, but it's like I guess you don't until you talk to somebody like yourself, right? Like
Yeah.
it's very hard to make that connection because
Yeah.
they're gone, right? It's just hard to.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And you have more people that you have to take care of too, right? Like I know there's a couple people here, whatever, and I mean that's not part of the conversation, but so that person, let's just take a kidney for instance. You know, that person now, I was actually in a room with a kidney recipient. They're not in dialysis anymore. So they're not every 3 days, they're not at the hospital. And from what I'm told, no sooner they start feeling better after having dialysis, they're back in dialysis, they feel horrible again. You know, there's a good chance that person now goes for walks, you know, with their grandkids or their kids, or what if that kidney, for instance, went to a 13-year-old who hadn't been out experiencing it? They could be playing sports now because you had that conversation, right? I mean, that's amazing. Never mind, like, look at me with this heart. I was in the gym this morning before I came here. You know, and I do jiu-jitsu a few times a week. I have a wife, 3 kids. All that because somewhere along the line, a front-line person like yourself said, hey, have you thought about organ donation? You know, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Or the lungs, for instance. There's a young girl that was on my ringette team back in, or one of the teams that I was on, in Goddard. And at some point, she may very well need a lung transplant, depending on how things go for her. And I mean, she's an absolute doll. She's adorable. She's one of the nicest kids you'd ever meet. By you doing that, you could very well save that person's life, because when that person gets the transplant, is there any other option? When you say to them, okay, the doctor says, okay, we should talk about organ donation. Is there any other option for that person, or are we at the point now where they're either taking their organs with them or they're donating?
we're at the point that, you know, there's nothing more we can do.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got somebody who's stable, you know, more than likely intubated or something, that you have the opportunity to do this, and it's like a pretty big discussion. It takes a lot of explanation, I think, to a family or anybody of, you know, why we're, you know, that somebody's either brain dead or whatever's happening, that this is now an option, right? Because it's life-changing for them, and it's a tough conversation, and because we have no other options at that point. Like,
Absolutely.
yeah.
So, if you can, very brief, what, like, so you mentioned, like, brain dead, for instance. We're not going to get into scientific tests and all that sort of stuff. David Suzuki has a great National Geographic thing on that where they go through all those. So brain dead, what else? Couple other things maybe that would say, okay, but this person is probably, well, not probably. I think we're in a case here where this person is either going to donate their organs or they're not, but there's no other step here, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, okay. Which I like to clarify that, because some people think that maybe sometimes they're going to grab an organ just because somebody needs it. Maybe the hospital isn't willing to go the extra mile, and I think that's false.
No, I think you need to make it very clear that there is nothing more we can do for that person. It's not like we don't want to, we would if we could. It's just like whatever it is, albeit a trauma or you know, something like, you know, you could drown, you could have just a brain injury from being hypoxic, anything, and there's just sometimes some things we can't fix, and it may mean, you know, that there's just nothing we can do, and it sucks to tell somebody that, but it has to be very clear that, you know, we have done everything we can, and even for a small facility, we can do a lot.
Yes.
And we talk to those bigger facilities, and sometimes they say there's nothing more they can do either, right? So
right.
It's,
and that's great to hear.
Yeah.
And I think too, what would be even nicer, a small facility. Now, I know for a fact what this facility is capable of, but I also know that there is a plane on standby at the airport that will take a medical emergency away.
yeah, it's really tricky.
It is tricky, but
but we do a lot of air transports. Yeah.
Right, and that's another thing. You walk through. That's okay. And I think that's another important thing, though, that is still another option. That if that option is an option that's viable, you're going to follow through with that option to send that person to, say, let's just call it Vancouver,
Prince
whatever.
George, Vancouver,
right.
Depends.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted people to hear that, just how hard you try.
Oh yeah,
right?
like when I've done it successfully, we are on the phone. We were talking to PTN, Patient Transfer Network, to arrange those flights with the BC ambulance, because it's a time-sensitive thing to keep somebody stable enough to, you know, it's pretty tricky. So we're on the horn.
And that's fantastic, right? And I think that's important for people to hear, just how far the medical staff, the frontline people are willing to go to try and save someone's life. But there is, unfortunately, that part where you run into a brick wall. Let's just keep it simple. How did you initiate the conversation?
I think we did it with our physician. It's hard. It was a while ago, but I think we had a big discussion because it was pretty sad. But it just with the family, just that there was nothing more.
Right.
I think we showed them like a CT and things like that. Like we showed them things that we could say. You know, there was nothing more at that point.
Great.
Yeah. It was just
smaller facility too. I mean, you're probably going to run in every once in a while. Are you going to run into somebody you know in here?
Yeah. Sometimes. Yeah.
So that could. This person, we're just going to leave it anonymous, of course, because that's how we are in Canada. All transplants are anonymous. Where your organs go are all anonymous. So I mean, there's another situation too, right? Being in a smaller center, it's a lot more personal, isn't it?
Yeah. I've had nurses, like, I'm not from here, but I mean, I've been here for a few years, so you get
Right.
to know people quite
Sure you
well.
do.
But there's people that grew up here, especially some of our older nurses and emerge and stuff, and they've had lots of times where, you know, it comes down to you're doing CPR and somebody you know. And it's, you know, you're talking to the family and having those discussions on your neighbor, like, you people you know, and it can be really sad. It's
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah, and I think too that's a nice point because as we're speaking about that and going the extra mile and taking those extra steps and everything, I think that just goes to show. I had my stuff done in Toronto,
Yeah.
and I had a bunch of strangers who bent over backwards to save me. I can be honest. There were several times when somebody could have thrown in a towel on me, and probably nobody would have said anything about it. But they never did. And I think that's important too in a small center where there's a real personal
Yeah.
connection, because probably somewhere in this hospital somebody knows, or there's a really good chance, I mean whatever, somebody who's in ICU is in trouble.
Yeah.
And I think that's another connection, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
So I think that's that extra bit.
Yeah, it can be hard sometimes, but there's lots of good things about being in a small community too,
Well,
right?
yes,
You
there
have
is.
those connections. But
Yes, there
it
is,
can
yeah.
be tough. It can be tough, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I know that lots of people have lots of things to say about hospitals. They have lots of things to say about nurses. They have lots of things to say about doctors. But I just want to clear this up. In the last 10 years of my experience, I've never had a bad situation. I've had a couple of situations maybe that maybe could have been better,
Yeah.
maybe. So that's probably 2 out of about 15,000. And of all the transplant patients that I talk to, very, 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 very rarely do I ever hear anything negative.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, there's situations like, oh, I wish I would have known this, or maybe we should have done this. But of course, you know, we're all dealing with humans and emotions and sensitivities and stuff like that. And I don't think myself, especially when it comes to frontline nurses, I don't think that they're praised as much as they should be. And I don't think that they're told enough of just how miraculous of a job that, for the most part, you ladies, I know there's some guys, but I'm just going to say that you ladies are doing on a daily basis. And I think that it's really important that you're told that.
Yeah.
Because I have experience with it. So I could almost be considered an expert on how awesome nurses are. I think, I'm pretty sure.
I'm sure you can.
I qualify.
Probably more than
I
me
qualify in there.
sometimes, yeah.
So, I mean, I obviously don't have the knowledge
Yeah.
of what a nurse does, obviously. I mean, for a million reasons, but as far as being treated, I think I'm an expert. I have a few friends that are experts as well, and they all say the same thing. So we're just going to leave it at that we're the experts, and we say nurses are
Yeah.
awesome. Because
Thank
you don't get the praise a lot of times you do. And so are the doctors and the surgeons and everything else. I get it. But you know, as far as our frontline care is involved, right? I just get nervous sometimes. These things are. So, anything else that you know that you'd like to add, especially being, you know, like in this position?
I don't know, I think it's just like, we are a very small team and we work like really hard and really well together. So
Right.
I think like stuff like this, it's just nice to be recognized, because especially up in Fort St. John, I don't
Yeah.
think we don't hear back a lot,
No.
right? Because we ship so many people out. So
Right.
things like this, it's always nice to hear
Yeah.
some good that comes out of
Yes.
what we're doing up here.
Yes.
Sometimes
Yeah,
we don't
and-
always hear things. Yeah.
It's I think when I was approached, because I live in Alberta now,
Mm-hmm.
and BC Transplant asked me if I'd continue to do this. Of course, I mean, I love doing it. I probably talk about transplant far too much to people, even strangers.
Yeah.
that I've met, stuff like that, because of just how important it is.
Oh, I'll come right in. Yeah. Okay.
And that's where what I love about these videos is when you do these videos, when you actually have people come and say, oh, by the way, because this is a small center, this is how it
It's
works.
just me in here with
Yeah.
my patients.
Yeah, so there you go. Anybody who's wondering, that nurses aren't working for their money and their knowledge and stuff like that. There's a prime example right there. Is our other nurse in here? Or we just
I can see if I can get her. She's just